We've just had some thumbs up, so I think that means go. Oh, and let's check the clicker's working as well. There we go. Awesome. So thank you for joining us for this session on having it all, which I know is something we're usually told you can't achieve, but hopefully we'll spend the next 20 minutes or so just having a look in the arena of customer experience and automation that maybe it's just starting to be possible. So I'm Rachel Curtis. I've got nearly 30 years in financial services, which makes me feel really old, but it is true. Mostly with banks and building societies. Last main role was as Chief Customer Officer with one of the challenger banks, but I also sit as a non-exec director on a building society board. I've only recently joined Content Guru, and that was after I saw their platform, which was predominantly developed for sort of big national critical infrastructure projects. So they do 999 services, lots of the government, those kind of things. And having seen the demo and gone, oh, that solves quite a lot of the problems we have in financial services, I've joined the team to sort of launch the financial services arm for them. So whilst I've got lots of experience in financial services, because I've mentioned those two words a lot, I don't actually know that much yet about contact centre telephony and solutions and software. So I'm learning about that bit, but I'm really delighted the other half of my double act today is Graeme, who does have all of that experience.
You've maybe raised those expectations a wee bit high. So I'm the other way around. I don't have banking or financial services experience, but I have spent 20 years in the telco world, the IT world, and the software space. And as Rachel said, we're Content Guru. We're a cloud contact centre vendor. So we provide software into the contact centre, and we'll chat a bit more today. Right, Rachel, we move on to agenda. Thank you very much. So 3 points, as you can see. The first one, the customer experience landscape, rising customer expectations. That's a statement of fact, or another way around. Our tolerance of bad customer services has completely fallen off a cliff. And a lot of that over the last 2 years has been down to the pandemic. I think during the pandemic, the feedback we've had from all kinds of clients and everyday consumers is we got tired of people saying, I know your parcel was due to arrive today. It's actually coming in a week because of COVID. We're going to take ages to answer your phone call because of COVID. We got tired of that and we no longer accept it. So I think that's a big thing. The other thing during the pandemic is we all became more tech savvy, and we probably use tech in a different way. If you think about Teams and Zoom are probably the main ones that we've used. I don't know about you in the room, but I certainly didn't use either of those really before the pandemic. But what I now do is I think, do you know, if there's 3 people that I think can solve my problem, I'm going to find the guy that's on green and I'm going to type him a message and I can see that he's read it. So I'm then looking at my clock saying, when's he coming back to me? The other thing is we used Amazon a lot more in the pandemic, and that is a wonderful example of perfect service. Amazon, whether you love them or loathe them, buying something from them is beautifully simple. And that's what we have now raised the bar, and we as consumers compare everyone against them. The balancing act, can you automate the human touch? I think we'll say, you guys can be the judge of that. We'll give you a bit of information today, but we're not going to tell you whether we think it's a yes or a no. Really interested to hear what you think. And then lastly, we'll talk a bit about cross-sector success. We've got information that tells us everyone is, well, I've given the Amazon example, everyone is looking out with their own industry to say, who can we learn from, who can we compare ourselves against? So we'll give you a wee bit of detail around that as well.
Okay, so starting on the customer experience part, and actually when I saw that, I started to reflect that CX is now very common language for us, but actually it was only probably 2017 I remember going into the board of the challenger bank I was at and trying to convince them that customer experience was this new thing and we needed to, in fact I fought to get my job title changed to Chief Customer Officer because I wanted the customer part of it. So that now is very common language, still very new to us, but actually moved very quickly and continuing to rise. And in terms of the landscape, I think there's been a huge shift around investment. So we're now seeing that around half of companies are investing in their CX strategy because they know that's the differentiator. And I'm sure, or I hope now, lots of conversations with CFOs and FDs are a little bit easier these days from a CX investment perspective because you can demonstrate the return on investment. There's loads of stats out there. So some we've got are around, the number of customers 91% more likely to purchase again if they've had a positive experience with you, and then nearly 80% forgiving you. So we know that from a complaints perspective, if you have a problem and you turn it around really well, those become huge advocates. I spoke to one person once who was saying, well, maybe we could make a mistake on purpose to have the opportunity to delight the customer and turn them into an advocate. I still think that's a slightly dangerous strategy, but I kind of got the sentiment. But obviously that's driving those experiences, driving those onward purchases and that loyalty. But as we sort of say, the expectations are rising, and over half of people expect more than they did last year because of those experiences from other industries coming across into financial services. And the one that still surprises me is only 11% wanting a lowest cost, no frills. Now, when I was at the Challenger Bank and we launched a lending arm, we did a set of research and it came out with that sort of result, with customers saying, you know, I'm prepared to pay more for something if I consider the service of value and you're doing something others aren't. And I was like, yeah, honestly, you say that on a research questionnaire, when we come to delivering it, you're going to want, you know, what's the price of the loan you're going to do? But I was kind of delighted because it made a very successful business that we were charging 4% over the typical high street lending rate for loans that were no great. There was some slight nuances in it, but it wasn't a higher risk book. But at 4% over, we were selling the same loans, but it was all about the service proposition that those customers were getting. They were getting treated individually. It was faster, it was slicker, it was tailored to them. And therefore people, you know, really do want that customer experience and will pay for it, basically. On the flip side, there's a lot of stats around sort of the apathy in the financial services market, and depending on the product, around 80% of customers will stay where they are, providing so at renewal or maturity of a product, they'll stay with their existing provider, providing the prices thereabouts and they've not been annoyed by the service, that kind of thing. So that apathy is huge, with only 20% of people looking around. And then you see you've got that huge stagnancy. But on the other side, you get it wrong and people absolutely vote with their feet. So we know nearly 90% of individuals and 2/3 of companies are shifting when they have a negative experience. And in the insurance market, the 80% stagnancy converts to 80% going if you annoy them a claims experience. And they're, like I say, getting it wrong, people vote with their feet, and getting it wrong in sort of our world of financial services and contact centres is, you know, the horrendous experiences we've got, sort of like you try and get through to somebody, they can't ID you, you know more than they do about your case, your call gets dropped and you have to ring back, you get transferred around so many agents, they don't carry their details with them. That sort of thing just wastes so much time for us, and those are kind of the things that are making us shift to other providers. So just looking at how we're trying to balance these things, and we know that to get that great customer experience, it is about highly tailored, me feeling like you value me, that I'm not just a number, those kind of things. But we also know that that's actually really expensive to deliver if you're trying to tailor everything for everybody. So then we get into this point of, well, okay, so to drive down my costs, I can automate various elements of the customer journey, but that then doesn't make them feel like they're highly personalised and that kind of thing. So you end up in this loop of trying to balance, and I've run a call centre before, and it was, how much can I get away with automating without impacting the customer experience to the point that I lose those customers? And you constantly feel like you're trying to get this balance and find the middle ground. But actually we're starting to see now there's a way, and we've got a case study that Graeme taught you through, where people have driven up their automation, driven down their costs, and massively driven up the customer experience, which is the sweet spot for all of us.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the balancing act. Can you automate the human touch? And like I said, I think you guys can be the judge of whether you see that to be the case or not. So if I go back a wee bit there, I've seen some name badges, so there's engineers and technically very strong people in the room, but I'm not one of those. And I think that in our industry, IT, software sales, telco, we overcomplicate stuff. We put in a lot of acronyms. And what you've got to do is Google the acronym, and then you Google what that is, and sometimes it's no clearer once you've done that. So I thought, let's explore just briefly, what is intelligent automation and what is AI, artificial intelligence? So, artificial intelligence, we'll go first. Tell you what we'll do a show of hands, we'll involve you for a wee bit. Who in the room has used, in the last, let's say, week, something like Amazon, Siri, or Echo, Alexa, that type of thing? Pretty much everyone. So that's a really simple example of artificial intelligence. You can ask it to do something fairly simple, and it will perform that for you. You can ask it to play a song, you can ask it to tell a joke. My 11-year-old son has discovered that you can ask Alexa to break wind, and she'll also perform that for you. Not that I'm advocating that's what you do when you go home, but that's something else. And then what is intelligent automation as well? And again, that's something that I think we overcomplicate, and this description probably is overcomplicated, but essentially what we do is we take what's happened in the past, we take what's happening real time, and we take that data and we give it to something that automates something. So we take the human being out of the process, I guess is the sense. So, a couple of things on people wanting to talk, which I think is very true. So a couple of stats for you. 30% say not being able to reach a human is the most frustrating part of bad customer services. Now 30% is a big number. People want to talk to people, that's really important. But what it also says is for 70% of people, that's not been the worst experience. Just a way of thinking about that. The next one's interesting too. 40% of customers prefer talking to a real person over the phone. That tells us conversely that 60% would appear they don't. So what we're seeing here is in an omni-channel contact center, voice is really important. But think about that number of 40%, right? And let's think of a real life scenario. If, I don't want to jinx anyone, but touch wood, if you woke at 2 or 3 in the morning to hear someone kicking your front door in, I think that's always going to be a phone call, 100% of the time. So that belittles the 40%, but that's an extreme example. And I don't think there would ever be a case where you would think, let me text someone, or let me use an app, or let me go on a form of social media. If I bring that example down to something less extreme, we do a lot of work and have done in the past with roadside recovery companies, so RAC, AA. If you break down by the side of the road, and you don't do that when it's a lovely summer's morning, do you? It tends to be a cold, wet night, 8 o'clock, you're on your own, you end up in some grass verge. Again, it's a phone call, and it probably always will be. But the interesting part is what these guys will tell you is everyone phones twice. So that doubles the amount of traffic that's going into the contact center. Why do they phone twice? Well, when you phone the first time, you give them, I don't know, your location details, maybe your car registration, then everyone asks the same question. When are you going to get here? And they can't be too specific at that point, so they say, look, might be up to 25 minutes. So you say, thanks a lot, no problem at all. And you maybe start to relax. Why does everyone phone back? The reason is human nature. We all look at our watch and say, that's only been 15 minutes, but it feels like an hour. I'm going to phone back and find out, are you really coming? Is it really what you said it would be? Where intelligent automation comes in, and we did this with 2 of the main roadside recovery providers, is after that first phone call, if we wait 5 minutes and send that person a text, so imagine yourself beside on the roadside, and that text says, don't worry, Graeme, Rachel, your recovery driver, is on her way. And actually, if you click on this link, you'll see a sat-nav type video image of her van actually coming to you. That then takes away completely that second call, and that's what these roadside providers have found. So if you think on an average day, they have 1,000 breakdowns, I'm making up numbers, that's 2,000 calls a day. We can cut that by 50% to 1,000 calls. What that does for the agent in the contact center is that frees up time. More time for, I don't know, training, more time for breaks, more time to make a shift a bit shorter. It's a massive, massive difference. So that's just one simple example of intelligent automation. But it's really important. The reason we phone is we want that empathetic experience. We want the person to say, we understand, we've got you, we're on our way. So, chatbots. Just a question. Yes?
I just wanted to ask you one thing. When you mentioned about the 40% part, did you go through the data in terms of people listed age, let's say 16 to 25 and 25 to 39? So because 40, but I think so that 40% would be even lower for 16 to 25 because the current gen they won't they prefer over a text, and
yes.
25 to 39 they might prefer I can't be bothered with the text, I need to call and
Yes, so you're absolutely right. Those weren't our figures, they were independently audited, but you're absolutely right. For that demographic, it's totally different. They actually, so my daughter's 14, I was telling you before, my son's 11, they actually hold their phone in a different way. They hold it that way, and they very rarely make a phone call. We've got clients who, fashion brands, who don't have voice at all. Everything is run over Instagram, for example. So you're absolutely right in that, and it's a really good point. It depends on the demographic too. An open question, do you have an opinion or have you had an experience on chatbots? What's it been like when you use them? What do you think? There's a face that tells a story. You don't particularly like them, right?
It can be a bit backward, I think. So it's at what point are you talking to a human? I
Yes.
think it's always a thing. It's like, no, you're not understanding me. And I think at the point where you say you're not understanding me, that's when you get the human.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, and I completely agree. And I think if you think about chatbots, what they're for, if you imagine, because we've got to think of the employee as well. Richard Branson often talks about the customer actually doesn't come first. The employee comes first, because if the employee's happy and engaged, then they serve the customer really well. Imagine working in a contact centre and you get 100 calls in a morning, and 95 of those 100 people ask you, what are the opening hours? It must be soul destroying. And that's what intelligent automation, that's what chatbots can take away. It's that simple stuff. But actually now, if we look at artificial intelligence, I don't know if you know, but in medical and the NHS, artificial intelligence is now being used to diagnose people's conditions. It's phenomenal. And what it does, if you think about it, it takes away human error, but it also takes away human feel. It bases it just on fact. So you're absolutely right in the chatbot part. In fact, it's almost as if you saw my next slide. Let's see if I can move it on. There we go. And I'll go a wee bit more. So this is what you were saying. It's about being directed to a human at the right time. What we often find with a chatbot is you'll ask some basic questions. As soon as you try and personalize it or bespoke it, it doesn't know the answer. And you then get diverted to a human. But quite often that human will say, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're phoning about, and you've got to start back again. Getting it right is when you're directed to the right area. Let's say it's regarding an insurance claim and that person comes in and says, I've got your claim details. I understand why you're phoning and I'm now here to help you. So it's that next step that you're absolutely right on. We've got self-service chatbots. Agents are liberated from routine inquiries is the big one there. And if you think about that example I gave you of the opening hours, that's really important. Intelligent automation can also carry out really simple, mundane tasks. If you think about the financial services agency, there's regulation, I don't know all the detail, but you've got to keep client documentation for a certain period of time, and you've then got to destroy them. You don't care as a consumer whether that's done by a human being or a machine. It doesn't matter to you, as long as your data is no longer there at the right time. That's another example of those kind of mundane daily tasks that these can carry out. Quality monitoring is an interesting one. Usually what contact centres will do there, that's about voice. Someone will listen into 100 calls and say, okay, my opinion on those is these were good experiences and these weren't. What AI and IA will do is look into that a little bit further, base it purely on fact, take the human error and the human feel out of it, and come back and say, we know that 63% of these calls were positive, etc. So it gives you better, sharper, and more accurate information. And then the last one here, quicker resolution of customer inquiries, really important on the AI part. So these are the things that we can do to improve things in the contact centre. And I just wanted to show you really quickly one cross-sector business case. We looked at Amazon earlier. I spoke to you about that briefly. But I'm going to show you this one. And this is why. Because over 60% of people say we learn from other sectors. And I think it's really important that we look at that. So the client we've chosen, or business we've chosen, is UKPN. I'll be open with you. I went to a lunch at the first part of the pandemic where you were allowed out in the public again. And it was one of those masks on, socially distant lunches. But I think, having worked out the kitchen for a year or whatever it was, I was just pleased to be anywhere. And I arrived at this lunch and there was a speaker. And I said, who's the speaker? And they said, someone else had organised it for me. And they said, oh, it's a customer services guy at a utility firm. I thought, this could be a long shift. The guy was brilliant. It was so interesting the way he approached it. This gives you a bit of background on the company, but he actually used the Amazon example. And what he said to us was, he said, in our industry, there's a league table. The top performing CX companies right down to the bottom. If you're one of the bottom three, you're fined, and you're fined massively. And what they do is they give that to the top performers. So it's a really serious business in the utilities world. And I'll give you examples just quickly of a couple of things that they did. So when there's a power cut, whatever it might be, their contact levels go up by 4,000%. So it's a massive rush of calls, huge pressure on the contact centre, really, really difficult to do. But with automation, we can handle that pretty seamlessly. So an example is, let's say there's a power cut in your area. You've probably had a similar experience. You get a text, says, don't worry, we understand you live in this postcode. We know there's been a power cut at 10:31. Don't worry, an engineer's on his way. That reduces that call volume by a huge amount. Just an example of intelligent automation. 93% of inbound calls in that scenario handled through intelligent self-service. So we're taking away the pressure from the agent. What that means for you as a consumer is the wait time condenses. You don't have that long wait. What we're able to do through intelligent automation is segregate vulnerable groups. It might be elderly people, it might be infirm people. We segregate them early, we target them with messaging, and we let them know what's going on. So that's a really important part as well. This one's interesting, IoT, so Internet of Things integration into smart devices. That's things like meters in the home. And what that will tell a power company straight away is last gasp. What they mean by that is when the power stopped, when the heating's switched off. So you can communicate accurately to that person through a message, using their name, telling them that you understand when the heating stopped and what's going on. And then you can do first breath and say, good news, we now have everything back. Really simple examples once again. And that resulted in 50% fewer repeat calls. And that's just with automated proactive messaging. That's all it is, really, really simple.
It's interesting, Graeme.
Yes.
UKPN used to be one of our clients. So I used to lead digital change and people analytics for a green tech consultancy.
Okay.
We worked with UKPN when they were bottom performing utility in the UK. You're absolutely right. That's the way the funding works. Every 5 years they get a pot of money, and they're not performing very well. But I think over a 3-year period, we got them from the bottom to right to the top, and they are at the top right now.
That's right. Absolutely. You've now worried me that you know the guy that I said it was going to be a boring lunch, right?
You didn't take any name.
But actually, I mean, I'll let you into a bit of a secret then. We loved that guy. And I just thought, he brought this to life. He now works for us. We actually pinched him from UKPN because of that fantastic success story. And he achieved part of that, although I'm certainly taking none of the credit, but he achieved part of that through our software. And just doing what we've spoken about. So that's really interesting that you've known that too. So there we go, great. Rachel, I give back to you.
It's me. Yeah, so the other thing about UKPM was they got to first, so not just in their own table, they got to first in the Institute of Customer Service overall table. So, and I couldn't process that to start with. So I was like, well, they're providing energy and they only ever get complaints when stuff doesn't work, but they still managed to convert themselves to the top because they were just handling their customer calls really, really well. So quite powerful. So that's what somebody else has done in another sector, and then looking at, okay, so how might we start to do things in financial services? And we've just done a study with a number of banks and their contact centres in terms of the sorts of queries that they're dealing with. And despite all the banks sort of doing things slightly differently, you do end up with very similar reasons. And we'll all recognise these because we've probably rang in about these. And the interesting thing is we can apply automation to different extents to all of them. So this is the table Graeme had a second ago with some of the examples of things we can use. And in the banking environment, so from an identification point of view, what's changing is we're using all of the data. So long gone are the days if you've got a PIN number, you're going to forget the PIN number, then you can't log in. We know a lot about you. Core banking systems have got all sorts of information in. We will use that information to make sure we know who you are. And then we will verify you, but we'll verify you at different levels. So depending on depends what you want to do. If you want to just get a little bit of information, we only have to verify you a little bit, and therefore that's easier. Or if you're going to change something fundamental on your account, we're obviously going to want to go much deeper with that. The important thing with that is then transferring it with the customer. So if the call's got to go through to another channel or another agent, it goes through with the details, but also the level you verified at, and then the information you'd need to capture if you were going to do the next thing. So we make the agent's job really good and the customer experience really positive. Once you're identified and verified, you can then do some of the self-service stuff, and some of this we'll have seen, account requests, that kind of stuff. But some of the stuff that's more interesting coming in is people confirming automated confirmation of things like direct debits, when's the next one, how much is it going to be. You don't need to speak to an agent for that, we can provide that for you. The most interesting one I've seen recently is around credit limits, so customers self-serving on credit limits. So as a bank, we know what their credit limit is in the background, we know what we'd approve them to. If the customer's requesting something in that, you don't need to speak to an agent, and they're happy to self-serve that kind of piece. So there's some more interesting things coming in that self-service arena. Quality monitoring, Graeme sort of mentioned monitoring the calls and sort of checking from a customer experience perspective, but I think there's a big saving around compliance stuff. So there's lots of things you've got to say to a customer, and if you've got QA checking those and saying whether that happened or not, that's an expensive resource. You can completely automate that against a set of things. Was this said? Was that said? Did that box get ticked in terms of the customer conversation, and take that out? And actually you could do 100% of calls rather than your smaller percentage if you're doing the QA. And also the sentiment routing that's starting to come in is quite interesting. So either tone or language can start to intervene really quickly and sort of flag up to a supervisor, this call, rather than an agent trying to do it, this call is starting to go down a route. You might want to intervene now or be aware of it or monitor it, because if you do that now and de-escalate that with the customer there and then, that's done and finished. It doesn't turn into a complaint afterwards that then you spend much more time and resource dealing with. So that early intervention can be a really useful way. And also automating it, because not all agents can sense when stuff's escalating, but actually AI could do it better and actually get the help when they need it. And then there's obviously all the AI stuff that we talked about. So the difference between chatbot and sort of the new breed of conversational AI is all about how the data's trained. As Graeme said, you get thousands of utterances in a very narrow topic, and it just means that that AI can work more effectively and actually understand common language. It gets slang, all of that kind of stuff. And it will help the agents. So I've seen one company recently, they've cut their agent training time down from 3 weeks to 2 weeks because they're using the AI to train the agents, not actually having to do it. Or the system does what the agent used to do for it. So it's very efficient. And then there's kind of the new, sort of the latest stuff. So I probably lost a couple of hours on Sunday morning reading about consumer duty, which I'm never going to get those hours back, unfortunately, but we're all having to go through that, I'm sure, if that's in your world. And there's all this stuff we've got to do around recognising vulnerability, dealing with customers differently because of it, and that's where automation is really starting to help. You can design those customer journeys really effectively. You can deliver bespoke routing or messaging or treatment. And this is not a very pretty screen because it's actually just an agent screen, but this is one of our customers that's already doing that. So they're monitoring vulnerability, they're updating it, they're putting review dates in, and that's coming through on their agent calls with the right level of verification. So it is happening now, and we're starting to see some of those solutions coming through. So that was just some examples of stuff we've seen in financial services and sort of where it can go. It's sort of, we're probably only limited by our imaginations. That sounds like a really fancy phrase I've heard somewhere, but it is true. We can solve those processes, and we have to be really innovative with that. The systems can do it. It's down to us to come up with what those solutions might be. And back to Graeme to wrap up.
Yeah, this is just lastly, and I think really what we're trying to convey on this slide is it's all about choice. It's all about being able to contact whoever you're trying to contact, anywhere, anyhow. We use the example of one platform is just Instagram, but generally speaking, anywhere you can in any way. We do a lot of work at the moment with Police Scotland, and that's probably your fairly typical, it's always going to be a phone call. We used that example, didn't we, of the 999. But actually, if you start to think about it and think, okay, if you were driving home today and you saw something minor, I don't know, someone hanging out suspiciously in front of a building, what would you do? And I don't know. And I said to Police Scotland, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't phone 999. I know there's a 1, but I don't really know what that's for. I don't think there's anywhere where I can just send a message and say, look, I've just seen a guy, 16 Smith Street. You should know about it. So actually, it's about giving choice and letting people communicate. The gentleman made a really good example of the younger demographic. Let them communicate in any way they like to do. Thank you very much. Absolutely lovely talking with you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and attention. Really great, so thank you.